A brutal, once-in-decades blizzard clawed at New York City, burying streets under 2 feet of snow. But for Sarah Bennett, huddled in the bitter concrete alcove beneath the Manhattan Bridge, the storm raged just as fiercely within her. At 29, she'd gone from a comfortable life to this, a death-cold December night, praying the thin coat pulled tight around her would be enough. 48 hours. That's all it took for her world to collapse. Just 2 days prior, Sarah was an English teacher at Washington Heights Academy, planning her winter break from her modest Bronx studio, dreaming of a down payment. She'd built a life, brick by painstaking brick, despite the grind of an underfunded school system. Then, disaster struck with surgical precision. It started at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Faulty wiring, ancient and unseen, erupted in her building. She'd escaped with only the pajamas on her back and her phone, watching, barefoot on the frozen sidewalk, as fire devoured her apartment, her books, her laptop, her grandmother's jewelry, everything. Her landlord's negligence meant no sprinklers, no escapes, and her renter's insurance, a cruel irony, had lapsed during her mother's medical crisis in Ohio. All gone, reduced to ash and smoke. But the fire was only the opening act. At the emergency shelter, a Red Cross beacon in the chaos, Sarah tried to access her savings, a small lifeline. It was gone. Her ex-boyfriend, Derek, had systematically drained their joint account. Nearly $15,000, money she'd forgotten, remained accessible. His vindictive transfers, small enough to bypass alerts, had emptied 3 years of her labor. Derek, increasingly unstable since their breakup 6 months ago, had vanished. His phone disconnected, his last address abandoned. The shelter's 72-hour limit was a ticking clock. With no money, maxed out credit cards from medical bills, and no family in striking distance, Sarah faced a truth she'd never dared to imagine. Homelessness. She spent one night in her car, outside the school she loved, but the blizzard consumed her gas tank, then froze the vehicle itself. Now, with a borrowed coat and a growing desperation, she found herself beneath the bridge. The wind howled, a predatory shriek through the steel girders. Her fingers, despite her cheap gloves, were going numb. The heavy, sluggish feeling of hypothermia crept in. She closed her eyes, trying to conjure solutions, but her mind felt locked in ice. No money, no ID beyond her phone case, no one to call. This is it, she thought. I'm going to die here, and no one will even know until I miss work after the holidays. That's when she heard them. Slow, deliberate footsteps echoing through the cavernous underpass. Fear, sharp and visceral, sliced through the cold. Street stories flashed in her mind, grim tales of vulnerability and harm. She pressed deeper into the shadows, a desperate plea for invisibility. The footsteps stopped directly in front of her. Miss? The voice was deep, touched with a subtle Italian cadence, yet surprisingly gentle. Are you all right? Sarah looked up. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the distant streetlights. Even in the gloom, the man's expensive coat, leather gloves, and polished shoes spoke of a world utterly alien to her own. He carried himself with the quiet authority of someone in control, yet his posture was not threatening. It held a strange, unexpected concern. I'm fine, Sarah lied, her voice a fragile tremor of cold and terror. No, you're not, he countered, stepping closer. His face emerged from shadow, mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, strong Italian features, handsome yet authoritative. His dark eyes held intelligence and something else, a flicker of genuine worry. You're freezing to death under a bridge in the worst storm we've had in years. I'm just waiting for someone, Sarah managed, a pretense as thin as her coat. At 3 in the morning, in a blizzard. His tone was gentle skepticism. How long have you been out here? When Sarah didn't answer, he knelt, bringing himself to her eye level. What's your name? Sarah, she whispered. Sarah, I'm Marco Benedetti, and I think you need help. The name felt vaguely familiar, a ghost of a memory she couldn't place. But Marco's demeanor patient, respectful, his concern palpable, chipped away at her wall of caution. What kind of help? She asked, her voice raspy. The kind that keeps you from freezing to death, he replied, his gaze unwavering. When did you last eat? Sleep somewhere warm? Sarah struggled to remember. The Red Cross shelter felt like a lifetime ago. Since then, it had been vending machine scraps and grocery store samples, snatched before security arrived. I don't remember. Marco's expression tightened. Sarah, you cannot stay here. The temperature is supposed to drop another 10 degrees, and this storm won't break until tomorrow afternoon. You'll die of exposure. I don't have anywhere else to go. The words spilled out, raw with desperation. She saw a swift emotion flash across Marco's face. Not anger at her, but a potent fury at the circumstances that had brought her to this point. What happened? He asked, his voice softer now. How does someone end up sleeping under a bridge in December? And so, Sarah told him, the fire, the theft, the brutal cascade of misfortunes that had stripped her bare. Marco listened, his focus absolute, making her feel for the first time in days that her nightmare actually mattered. You're a teacher, he stated when she finished, a note in his voice suggesting its significance. Was a teacher, maybe, she corrected, the full weight of her losses pressing down. I don't know if I'll ever go back. No ID, no materials, no... Her voice trailed off, lost in the icy air. Marco studied her face for a long moment. Then he stood, extending a gloved hand. Come with me, Sarah. Where? Somewhere warm, somewhere safe, somewhere you can eat a real meal and sleep in a real bed while we figure out how to fix this. Sarah stared at his hand. Every warning, every lesson about strange men and dangerous situations screamed at her to refuse. Yet, the brutal reality of her situation screamed louder. Take it or die. I don't know you, she said, the words barely a breath. You don't have to know me, Marco replied, a faint smile touching his lips, transforming his imposing features into something almost paternal. You just have to trust I'm not going to hurt you. How do I know that? She asked, a sliver of hope battling the ingrained caution. If I wanted to hurt you, the man said, his voice low but cutting through the city's ceaseless drone. I wouldn't have pulled you from under a bridge first. I'm standing here at 3 in the morning, offering help to a stranger. That makes me either genuinely concerned or completely insane. And I promise you, he held her gaze, I am not insane. A ghost of a smile touched Sarah's lips, despite herself. That's not exactly reassuring. What would be? He countered. Sarah considered it. Knowing you won't expect anything inappropriate in return. Knowing if I change my mind, you'll let me leave, no questions asked. And knowing you actually have the resources to help, not just get me into a worse situation. Without a word, he pulled out his phone, holding the screen towards her. A banking app blazed with an account balance, more zeros than Sarah had ever seen in her life. "I have resources," he stated, the words simple, unarguable. Her eyes flicked from the extended hand, still waiting, to the intensifying storm, then to the failing concrete slab that had been her only shelter. The cold was a living thing, clawing at her. She reached out and took his hand. Marco's car was a silent marvel, a luxury sedan that hummed to life instantly. The heated seats were a shock of warmth, pulling a soft gasp from Sarah as feeling slowly seeped back into her frozen limbs. As they glided through the deserted, rain-slicked canyons of Manhattan, Sarah studied him more closely. He was undeniably handsome, a mature, sophisticated allure born of good genes and the kind of meticulous care only money could buy. His clothes were expensive but understated, his watch a quiet declaration of high-end craftsmanship. Everything about him whispered of wealth and a quiet power that felt almost otherworldly. Yet it was his manner that truly struck her. He drove with an easy competence, asked about her comfort, offered her chilled bottled water from the console, treating her with a deferential courtesy that spoke of respect, not pity. He saw her as a person, not a problem. "Can I ask what you do?" Sarah ventured, as they paused at a red light in Midtown, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. "Business," he replied smoothly, a polite but vague answer known to mask deeper truths. "My family owns several enterprises across the city." Sarah sensed a hidden narrative, but weariness and a surge of gratitude kept her from pressing. "What kind of enterprises?" "Restaurants, construction, real estate development. Our roots run deep here, 4 generations in New York." The drive continued, and Sarah realized their trajectory, Upper East Side. When the car pulled up to a magnificent brownstone, occupying an entire corner lot, a sudden wave of self-consciousness washed over her. Her appearance, her circumstances, they felt stark against this backdrop. "This is your home?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "One of them." He turned to her, his expression soft. "Don't worry about how you look, Sarah. You're exactly where you need to be." Inside, the house was breathtaking but lived in. Gleaming hardwood, antique Persian rugs, and art that felt curated for passion, not just investment. Family photographs dotted the living spaces, imbuing the grandeur with warmth and a sense of shared history. "Are you married?" The question slipped out before she could catch it, a sudden concern that her presence might be an intrusion. "Divorced 3 years ago. No children. It's just me and Mrs. Romano, my housekeeper, who comes in during the day." The relief that flooded Sarah was surprisingly potent. "Hungry?" Marco asked, hanging their coats in a closet that probably cost more than her former monthly rent. "Starving," Sarah admitted, the truth a raw ache in her stomach. "Good. I make excellent pasta, and I haven't cooked for anyone in months." He moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, assembling what looked like a gourmet meal despite the late hour. Sarah watched, a growing fascination battling her exhaustion. Here was a man of undeniable wealth and influence, personally cooking for a homeless stranger at 4 a.m, without a hint of it being unusual or burdensome. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah finally asked, as he set a steaming plate of perfectly prepared carbonara before her. "Doing what?" He settled across from her, his own plate in hand, studying her face in the warm glow of the kitchen light. "All of this. Rescuing me. bringing me to your home, cooking for me. You don't know anything about me." "I know," Marco began, his gaze steady. "You're a teacher who lost everything through no fault of your own. I know you had the courage to survive on the streets rather than compromise your principles for help with strings attached. I know you are intelligent, educated, and deserving of assistance. But why do you care?" Marco paused, choosing his words with care. "My mother was a teacher," he said finally. "Fourth grade, public school in Brooklyn. She poured her heart into those kids, spent her own money on supplies, stayed late tutoring. She believed teachers changed lives, but rarely got the support they deserved. What happened to her? She died when I was 17, cancer. But before she went, she made me promise to always help teachers when I had the means." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, touched by the raw love and respect in his voice. "She sounds wonderful." She was. She would have liked you. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his own. The warmth of his touch sent an electric current through her arm, making her suddenly acutely aware of Marco as a man, not just a rescuer. Attractive, powerful, successful, treating her with a kindness she hadn't felt in months. And, he added, his voice firm, she would have been furious to know someone was letting a teacher freeze under a bridge when they had the power to prevent it. "Marco," Sarah said carefully, pulling her hand away gently, "I need you to understand. I'm not in a position to offer anything in return. No money, no connections, nothing valuable to trade." His thumb began tracing slow circles on the back of her hand again, spreading warmth through her entire body. "Sarah, I'm not helping you because I expect something in return. I'm helping you because it's the right thing to do. But you must want something. Everyone wants something." Marco smiled, a tender, almost predatory curve of his lips. "What I want is for you to be safe, warm, fed, and taken care of while we figure out how to rebuild your life. What I want is to ensure you never sleep under a bridge again." He paused, his dark eyes locking onto hers, the intensity deepening. "What I want," he finished, his voice a low thrum, "is for you to let me take care of you." The possessive cadence of "let me take care of you" should have been a red flag, but instead it evoked a powerful sense of protection and desire Sarah hadn't felt in years. For how long? For as long as you need. For as long as you want. And what do you get out of it? I get the satisfaction of honoring my mother's memory. I get the pleasure of watching someone rebuild their life with proper support. I get the opportunity to take care of someone who deserves to be cared for. Sarah stared at him, trying to parse the layers of his offer. It sounded as if he proposed to solve all her problems, simply because he could, without demanding anything specific in return. "This is crazy," she breathed. "The best things usually are." After they finished eating, Marco led her to a guest room that dwarfed any hotel suite she'd ever imagined. The bed was enormous, piled high with silk sheets and down comforters that looked more valuable than her former monthly rent. The attached bathroom boasted a soaking tub, a rainfall shower, and every amenity she could possibly need. "There are clothes in the closet that should fit you," Marco said, gesturing to a walk-in wardrobe already stocked with women's apparel in various sizes. "Tomorrow, we'll get you whatever else you need, but for tonight, just rest." "How did you know what size to get?" Sarah asked, amazed by the array of high-quality garments. Lucky guess, he replied with a smile, a hint of something more lingering behind his eyes. Sleep as long as you want. We'll talk about next steps when you're ready. As Marco turned to leave, Sarah found herself not wanting him to go. Marco, he paused. Yes? Thank you. I know I keep saying it, but I don't know how else to express what this means to me. He moved back, close enough for her to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to catch the expensive scent of his cologne. You don't need to thank me, Sarah. You need to rest. And tomorrow, we're going to start fixing everything that went wrong. The absolute certainty in his voice, the unshakable confidence that he could and would solve her problems, was both profoundly reassuring and slightly overwhelming. How can you be so sure you can fix things? Because I have resources, connections, and the determination to make sure you get back to doing what you love. Because teachers like you don't deserve to have their lives destroyed by circumstances beyond their control. He reached up, his touch gentle yet possessive, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. Sleep well, Bella. Tomorrow, everything changes. The way he said, everything changes, sent shivers through Sarah. Shivers that had nothing to do with cold, and everything to do with the potent promise in his voice. After he left, Sarah stood in the stunning guest room, slowly processing the dramatic, improbable transformation of her world. The shower struck her first, not the usual meager spray, but a cascade, a warm, heavy rain that had been a fantasy during the endless, biting nights under the bridge. Expensive soaps scented the air with lavender and citrus, and the towels, oh, the towels were thick and soft, heated by the unseen coils beneath the marble floor. Sarah let the steam embrace her for almost 40 minutes, feeling the knots of cold and terror unwind from her muscles. Earlier that morning, she'd woken up with the chilling question of survival. Now, enveloped in silk pajamas that fit her as if handmade, she moved through a luxury townhouse, a guest in a life so far removed from her own it felt like a dream. She found herself wondering about Marco. What kind of man had the resources, the foresight, to keep a guest suite meticulously stocked with women's clothing in every conceivable size? And what, precisely, did he expect in return for this arrangement? Yet, as she sank into the impossibly soft bed, the questions dissolved into an overwhelming wave of relief. Warm, safe, cared for. For the first time in weeks, sleep claimed her without the gnawing fear of the next cold dawn. A shaft of sunlight, crisp and new, woke her. It streamed through a tall window, overlooking a private garden dusted in fresh snow, painting the unfamiliar room in diamond light. For a breathless moment, she couldn't place herself. Then, like a sudden flood, the night rushed back. The merciless cold beneath the bridge, the roaring storm, Marco's unexpected rescue, the all-encompassing warmth of his home. The scent of brewing coffee and baking bread drifted up, and her stomach rumbled, a normal, manageable hunger, not the desperate gnawing she had grown accustomed to. Laid out for her were clothes that seemed chosen with uncanny precision, jeans that fit perfectly, a deep blue cashmere sweater that intensified the color of her eyes, and intimate apparel that was both expensive and exactly her size. A note, penned in elegant script, lay beside them. Good morning, Bella. Come down when you're ready. There's much to discuss. M. Descending the grand staircase, Sarah found Marco in a modern, gleaming kitchen, dressed in dark jeans and a button-down shirt, he looked less formal than last night, yet no less striking. He was orchestrating a symphony of breakfast, eggs sizzling, bacon crisping, fresh bread warming, and fruit arranged like a still life on fine china. "Good morning," he said, turning with a smile that sent a surprising thrill through her. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Sarah admitted, surveying the spread. "This is incredible. You didn't need to go to all this trouble." Marco's laugh was low, genuine. "It's not trouble. It's a pleasure. I told you, I haven't cooked for anyone in a long time." As they ate, the morning light revealed new facets of Marco. Beyond his undeniable handsomeness, it was his unwavering attentiveness that struck her, the way he anticipated her unspoken needs, his genuine concern for her comfort. "So, Sarah," Marco began, setting down his fork, "let's talk about rebuilding your life. What's the first priority?" "Getting my identification replaced, I guess," she confessed, the memory of her lost documents a dull ache. "Driver's license, social security card, my teaching certificate, all lost in the fire." "Consider it done," Marco responded, his voice calm, assured. "I have people who can expedite that process." "Marco, you can't just—" "Sarah," he interrupted gently, his gaze unwavering. "I have connections throughout the city government. Things that would take you months can be handled in days if you know the right people." "What kind of connections?" she asked, a flicker of unease mixing with fragile hope. Marco offered a slight smile, carefully guarded, the kind that come from 4 generations of family business in New York, the kind that exist when you've helped enough people that they're willing to return favors. It was another diplomatically vague answer, and Sarah felt a subtle shift in the air, a realization that Marco's influence extended beyond conventional bounds. "What exactly does your family do?" she asked, her voice more direct than intended. Marco placed his coffee cup softly on its saucer, his expression a fascinating blend of seriousness and amusement. "We provide services that exist in the spaces between what's legal and what's necessary. We solve problems that traditional systems can't or won't address. We protect people and businesses that need protection. And we ensure that certain kinds of enterprise can operate smoothly in a city often hostile to entrepreneurs." "Are you in the Mafia?" The question hung, stark and unexpected, between them. Marco's expression remained unchanged, but Sarah sensed she had stumbled into territory few dared to tread. "That's a very direct question," Marco said finally, his gaze piercing. "It deserves a direct answer. My family operates according to principles of loyalty, honor, and mutual protection that go back generations. We take care of our own. We honor our commitments, and we don't allow anyone to harm the people under our protection." It wasn't a confession, but it wasn't a denial either. "And what does that make me?" Sarah pressed, her heart quickening. "If I accept your help, what am I becoming part of?" Marco leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "You're becoming someone under my personal protection, someone whose well-being is my responsibility and my priority, someone who doesn't have to worry about survival anymore because someone else is handling those concerns." The possessive phrase, "my personal protection, my responsibility," sent a strange heat spiraling through Sarah. "For how long?" she managed. "For as long as you want, for as long as you need." "And what do you expect in return?" Marco reached across the table, his hand enveloping hers. His thumb traced a gentle pattern on her palm, sending an electric current up her arm. I expect you to let me take care of you. I expect you to trust me to handle problems you can't handle alone. I expect you to stay here, where I know you're safe, while I fix the things that need fixing. That's all. Marco's smile was slow, devastating. For now. The implication embedded in those two words ignited a potent mix of anticipation and nervousness within Sarah. Marco, she said, carefully retracting her hand, I need you to understand that I'm not in a position to make good decisions about relationships right now. I've been homeless for less than a week. I'm completely dependent on your charity, and I barely know you. You're not dependent on my charity. You're under my protection. There's a difference. What's the difference? Charity is temporary, conditional, something you're grateful for until you can manage on your own. Protection is permanent, unconditional, something that exists, whether you need it or not. The absolute certainty in his voice when he said permanent should have been alarming, yet it instilled a sense of security Sarah had never known. That sounds very possessive. It is possessive. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Marco's eyes held hers with unwavering intensity. From the moment I saw you under that bridge, something in me decided that you were mine to take care of. I can't explain it, and I'm not going to apologize for it. That's a little intense for someone you just met. The best things usually are. Over the next few days, Sarah watched in quiet astonishment as Marco dismantled every problem that had seemed insurmountable when she was alone. Her identification documents were replaced with an efficiency that hinted at significant influence within city bureaucracy. Even her stolen money, rather than merely recovered, was somehow multiplied, appearing in an account with significantly more than the thief Derek Taubal, had taken. How did you find him? Sarah asked when Marco presented her with the bank statements. I have people who are very good at finding those who don't want to be found, Marco replied simply. Derek won't be bothering you, or anyone else, again. What does that mean? It means he's decided to relocate to a different state and pursue opportunities that don't involve stealing from teachers. The subtle shift in Marco's tone suggested unfathomable depths, and Sarah instinctively knew that the details were something she neither needed nor truly wanted to know. Within a week, Marco had also arranged an interview for her with the principal of an exclusive private school in Manhattan, urgently seeking an experienced English teacher mid-year. The salary was nearly double her previous earnings, the benefits exceptional, and the working conditions a stark contrast to her years in underfunded public classrooms. How did you arrange this? Sarah asked after the interview, which had been surprisingly flawless. The school's board includes several people who owe me favors, he explained. When I mentioned an exceptional teacher available due to circumstances beyond her control, they were very interested. And they offered me the job based on your recommendation. They offered you the job based on your qualifications, your experience, and the impression you made during the interview. My recommendation simply got you in the door. But beyond the tangible solutions, Marco had given Sarah something she hadn't realized she desperately needed, a profound sense of being valued and protected, transcending mere assistance. He treated her with a preciousness that spoke of genuine care, her happiness and success mattering to him in ways that had nothing to do with obligation or charity. I need to ask you something, Sarah said one evening, during their new routine of sharing dinner in his elegant dining room, the highlight of her day. Anything. Why me, really? You could help anyone, protect anyone, take care of anyone. Why did you decide I was worth this level of investment? Marco was silent for a long moment, swirling the dark wine in his glass, considering his answer. Do you remember what you told me about why you became a teacher? He asked finally. You said you wanted to help kids from difficult circumstances, kids who needed someone to believe in them. And you spent your own money on supplies, stayed late tutoring, advocated for those with no one else in their corner. That's what teachers do. Marco leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto hers, and Sarah's pulse quickened. No, Sarah, that's what exceptional teachers do. That's what people with generous hearts and strong characters do, even when it costs them personally. When I found you under that bridge freezing, desperate, yet still holding on to your dignity, I saw someone who had spent her life taking care of others and deserved to have someone finally take care of her. A shiver traced Sarah's spine, unrelated to the cold, directly tied to the way he looked at her. I saw someone worth protecting and cherishing, someone who should never suffer again. And that was enough. That was all it took. That was everything. From that moment, whether you knew it or not, you were mine to take care of. The possessive certainty in his voice stole her breath. Marco, she whispered, what are we really doing here? He rose, moving around the polished table until he stood beside her chair. Close enough for her to catch the expensive scent of his cologne, close enough to see the minute gold flecks in his dark eyes. We're building something that began with protection and is becoming something far deeper. What kind of something? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The kind of something that means you never have to worry about survival again. The kind of something that means someone will always be there to solve your problems, to shield you from anything that threatens your happiness. He reached down, cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the delicate curve of her cheekbones. The kind of something that means you belong to someone who will cherish you, take care of you, and never let anything hurt you again. That sounds like you're talking about ownership, Sarah said, a tremor in her voice. I'm talking about devotion, he countered, his gaze unwavering. I'm talking about commitment. I'm talking about the kind of love that transforms both people involved. And when he kissed her, it was with a pent-up passion that had been building since the night he'd found her in the snow. Sarah met him with equal intensity, pouring all her gratitude and a burgeoning love into their shared connection. 3 months later, Sarah, now Mrs. Benedetti, 3 weeks ahead of schedule, stood before her new students at the Manhattan Preparatory Academy. The hum of creative writing assignments filled the room, a stark contrast to the underfunded chaos of her old school. She'd found unparalleled professional happiness here, surrounded by engaged students, abundant resources, and administrators who valued her contribution. But more profoundly, she had found something she hadn't known she was missing. A partner who cherished her, protected her, and opened doors to opportunities, all without ever making her feel diminished. Mrs. Benedetti? A young voice cut through her thoughts. Yes, sweetheart. Can you help me with this essay about overcoming challenges? Of course, Sarah replied, moving toward the student, a quiet smile playing on her lips. She thought of her own improbable journey, from homelessness to this bright, spacious classroom. That evening, sharing dinner with Marco in their new home, a familiar warmth settled over her. "Any regrets about rescuing a frozen teacher from under a bridge?" she asked, a loving tradition between them. Marco reached across the table, taking her hand. "My only regret is that you had to suffer before I found you. If I could change anything, it would be that I met you before you needed rescuing." But then, he paused, bringing her hand to his lips. "We might never have found each other at all. Sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find what you truly need. I'm grateful for the storm that brought you to me, Sarah. And I'm grateful that you were the kind of man who couldn't just walk past someone in need." He smiled, a tender, possessive curve of his lips. "From the moment I saw you, Sarah, I knew you were mine. I just had to wait for you to understand it, too. And now you're exactly where you belong. With me, under my protection, loved, cherished, and safe forever." Sarah looked at him, at the life they had built from the ashes of her desperation. One harrowing night had laid the foundation for the most beautiful relationship she could have imagined. Sometimes, she reflected, the worst circumstances lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes, losing everything was just making space for something better. And sometimes, the most important words weren't, "I love you," but "from now on, you're mine." Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.